Not Board of Education, not Board of Education, Cobb County celebration, helping kids no hesitation, not Board of Education.
Welcome back to Not Board of Education. I am Laura Judge.
Hello, I'm Andrew Cole.
Yes, and thanks for coming back. We have a special guest with us here today, our friend of the show and just friend in real life, Micheal Garza. Micheal, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Micheal Garza. I am parent of a third grader in Cobb schools. I've lived in Cobb County for over 20 years, and I'm active in our schools and our PTA, and occasionally I'll visit the Cobb County School Board.
Thank you, Micheal. So this is actually a re-record of episode 6. You might have seen some snippets from us from when we did this before. We're going to try to stick to what we recorded before, but add in some new information. We had some audio issues, and hopefully we don't run into those again. So the biggest thing that we had talked about was back in September, a MAP lawsuit was dropped, and Micheal was very involved in that MAP lawsuit. And our Cobb County School Board sent out a communication saying that they won this lawsuit. So we had brought Micheal on to kind of talk about what happened in this lawsuit.
Sure, and I'll preface this by saying that the redrawing of maps for the Cobb County School Board is completely a legislative function of the state government. It is not something that school boards wade into, but for some reason our school board decided to do so, and it did so at a cost of over $2 million to taxpayers. They hired a firm to do the map. They hired that firm and related firms to defend that map in court, even though we weren't a party to any of the lawsuits that happened after a judge ruled that the map was a racial gerrymander of our county. And that was something that I was a part of in the beginning, in terms of it was the first time that I went to public comment was back when the maps were first being discussed at the school board. We approved it on a 4-3 vote. I had a discussion with Randy Scamahorn, the board chair, not only in that meeting and afterwards on an hour-long phone call, which I would recommend nobody have an hour-long phone call with Randy Scamahorn. And then I was at several of the hearings at the state legislature during the process.
Yes, and I was at those meetings with you. Very, very long meetings, very passionate pleas from the community about letting this be in the legislators' hands. And just seeing this workaround was very upsetting to see.
Did y'all
Something
see
that you
the?
mentioned, though.
Oh, sorry, to jump in real quick. I just wanted to see if y'all, 'cause I can't remember. I'm trying to think back to those days, and like I don't remember seeing the superintendent or any of the members of the school board majority at those meetings. I was just wondering if y'all noticed or saw them at those meetings during those times.
No, they weren't. My times at the Capitol, we do have a legislative advocacy person with Cobb County School District. I did not remember seeing her at those meetings. In the halls, I also did see our strategy person, John Floresta. But I don't remember him at those meetings. I did see him in the hallway and talking to people, but not during that whole situation.
No, there were mainly two people there that were pushing it. There was Jenny Earhart, a representative of West Cobb, who just coincidentally is also the wife of of Earl Earhart, who was part of the multiple law firms that were paid $2 million to draw and defend these maps. And also there was Ed Setzler, who drew the second map that was required once um, Cobb County lost the lawsuit, the original lawsuit, which required the redraw.
Yeah, and these maps changing so much, it affects so many voters in the area. One of the things that I had mentioned for myself is that when they were originally changed, I moved from post 6, which was supposed to have an election in 2022, into post 5, which pushed my election time back to 2024. So it was, instead of every 4 years voting, it took 6 years for me to vote for my school board representative.
And that wasn't, and you're not alone in that. There were over 100,000 East Cobb residents who that happened to, and approximately 50,000 residents that were around the Kennesaw area in which that happened to. And that was all outlined to the state legislature whenever the original maps were being discussed. And we had a letter writing campaign. Dozens of community members reached out, and on both the Republican and the Democratic side, saying that we want maps that actually don't move. These maps moved over 30% of the county to create a set of maps which were drawn solely to ensure that the current board majority stayed in power. And in doing so, they moved largely Latino and Black voters into certain posts. And again, over 30% of the county was moved, even though they could have had a legal map, either keeping the existing maps or moving less than a few percentage points of the population.
So the biggest thing is, and I know we discussed it in our first recording, is why would Cobb County Schools say that they won this lawsuit when it had just been dismissed? What would you think about that?
Well, they're we have a history of claiming things that are simply not true, of slapping things on a graphic and putting that out there and then having to roll it back later because it really wasn't true. And this is the case here. Uh, Nobody won. What happened is that because a second map was redrawn after the first map was thrown out, that the first map was moot. It was no longer a concern. It was the basis of the lawsuit, and because there was a second map in place, that the lawsuit was dismissed because the map no longer existed. But the county did lose because we have maps now that we know are still racially gerrymandered, but instead of 30% of voters being moved, roughly 26% of Black and Latino voters were still moved, so that Black and Latino voters, residents in Cobb, cannot determine the leadership of the Cobb County School Board, even though around 63% of our students are Black and Latino. So for me, that's a lose for everybody. And what you're seeing since then is that you're seeing a school board that has been removing itself from the community because they don't feel like they have to answer to the community. And that's why they've been actively disengaging from the community over the last few years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you think that there might be another lawsuit against the map that was put in place before a judge could rule on it or look at it?
There very well could be another lawsuit, but keep in mind that if for example, a lawsuit were to come out, and even though we now have a much weaker Voting Rights Act since the election in 2024, we weren't found to be in violation of the Voting Rights Act. We were found to be in violation of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which is still intact. But what would happen is that the representatives would come together, most likely at Setzler again, and instead of moving 26% of Black and Latino voters, you would move 23%. And we would keep doing this until, um, you know,
They get
forever.
their way. Well, of course, that kind of leads us into, and we didn't discuss this on our first iteration of this show, uh, these maps changing also led you to make a decision, Michael.
That's right. It was one of many things, and the resulting decisions of this board that has made sense. Then that has um, pushed me to announce my run for the Cobb County School Board for post 4. Well, I will be running against, and he has not formally announced yet, but the current board chair, David Chastain.
Okay, and with
Is that the
with
guy
our
who's in
maps,
all
the
the
way
school
that
videos?
they
Sorry, just to again jumping in
Yeah,
here.
it's coincidentally he is the he's in a lot of the videos for Cobb County schools. You might know him from tossing Lysol wipes and paper towels to bus drivers. Um, I might have gone with, say, working brakes and working AC, but that's
Teach
another
their
place
own.
where we might differ.
Yeah, I just in general, I'd like to highlight the and I know it's no secret, this came up a ton in the election last year, was the general public's frustration. And this was people on all sides of the political spectrum whom I spoke with. They were completely over the emails, the social media posts, and the direct CTLS notifications that were just serving as propaganda for the current school board majority and our upper level leadership. It's pretty heavy-handed, and it's frustrating to me because actions and benefits and progress and improvement should speak for themselves. Talk about what changed. Don't just give people FaceTime and lip service, but that's the current method.
Yeah, and I mean, that is another reason why I want to run for this position is that I want to turn the page on that. I don't need to see my face going across CTLS or across the district pages every other day just to promote me as a qualified school board candidate. I just want to do the work, and then at the end of 4 years, the work will speak for itself. I want our district communications to highlight the great work that's going on in our schools, but also to highlight the voices of those in the community who maybe aren't getting the services that they want and the things that we are going to do to improve the delivery of the services to those families.
absolutely. And we've talked at length before about our communications team getting a $1 million raise, and it seems that they are trying to be more heavy-handed with our board members. While they have increased some school activities and stuff, which is always great to see. They are really trying to promote the board members, and it always just seems so forced. Um,
Well, which
and
board members?
that's something that all three of us have talked about. You know, we're parents in the district. Uh, Michael, you and I have volunteered with our PTAs at all different levels. Um, and there's just such a way to, if you want that promotion, you can find people in their element rather than staging a photo shoot. Which that's not what being a board member is about, really. It's about the business of the district. Um, Speaking
Okay.
of the business of the district, it's been a while, Andrew. But board meetings, we haven't talked since probably the September board meeting. We've had an
Yeah,
October
it
one as
has.
well. Anything on your mind about board meetings?
Well, just to play a little bit of a time machine, there was the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and a very prevalent topic on all forums online was reactions to it. And I did not see anything from a current employee or educator of the district that could be construed as support for the act itself. I saw people who highlighted some disagreements with on the record stated views, and that was chased and construed by national outlets on social media, which led to the doxing and attacking of employees of the district. That's the number one thing that stands out in my mind when you talk about what's happened over the last few months.
Yeah, I remember that.
And there were, of course, long-winded speeches about right and wrong and good and evil, and just complete exaggerations of someone's actions on their personal page outside of school time. And if you go back in time and look and listen for times where we need to let our team members be team members and not we want them to be free to be themselves and so on, great. And that's been said in the past, but this time, because we needed actions to align with political initiatives at a national level, we took our instructions from activist groups online and chased down and confronted and resultingly fired employees of our district for a social media post. Again, I have still to this day never seen anything that I thought was completely uncouth. All I saw were quotes. And I mean, they're timed right around the event. So I understand the kind of harsh irony of posting that in the moment, but a political discussion was being had at a national, global level. And if I don't agree with what you say, I would still defend your right to say it if you're not invoking these thoughts or lessons in the classroom. And if they're edgy, I didn't even see anything that I would deem edgy necessarily, because in context, I understood what was being said, and so did everyone else at the school board and in our upper level leadership, but they wanted to make a statement. And I was wondering what they were going to find to do to participate in this national discussion, because when things are hot, they want to be a part of it. Please see the the really lengthy explanations for book bans over the last 3 years or so in Cobb County. And sorry, not bans, removals from availability in our schools. And it was just another one of those. They sought attention because of the discussion that was being had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You said book bans versus removals, potato, potato. Um, but yeah, unfortunately, we've had a couple of teachers removed, and I know currently there is a lawsuit now for one of those teachers at least of losing their job because that they used Mr. Kirk's words on one of their personal pages describing or in the aftermath of his assassination, which is interesting because, again, more recently, we just had a board member have something personal, and now the school board is like, we don't have to deal with their personal issues when they have just highlighted and fired teachers based on personal opinions or personal statements that they made on their own Facebook page.
That's weird.
Either
That
y'all
almost,
want to take that?
yeah, that seems hypocritical. Michael, have you heard anything? What's she talking about?
I think in Cobb, our standards are so high that we almost have double standards. But I mean, in terms of what went on with the teachers and what's went on with the book bans, and it was not only book bans. I'll restate that we we were also threatening media specialists at the time. That Randy Scamahort actually gave a threat to media specialists that they weren't part of the reading bowl, that we could find a different employment. So, I mean, whether he would consider that a teacher ban or a teacher removal, that's for him to say. But you see the thing that's in common here is they're setting a dividing line. They're saying they're putting a line in the sand, and then if you're on this side of the line, we're okay with you. And if you're on this side of the line, they've outright used the term that you're evil. And that's not what competent leadership does. They don't divide communities. They don't divide schools. They don't divide teachers versus teachers. This could have been done quietly, locally at a school level where maybe a principal could have talked to a teacher and just said, hey, just be a little bit more careful because this is a time in which there are going to be a lot of people who are hurting because of what happened to Mr. Kirk. But we instead use that as yet another way to divide the community, just as we did also whenever the superintendent was dividing the community over kids who live in apartments, kids who live in temporary housing, kids who live in what he called transient housing. And that's not what leadership does. Leadership should be bringing people together. And that's yet another reason why I decided, and it was a huge reason why I decided to come on board with running for the school board, is because I think that we do need people, and that's what people want, is people who are bringing us together in a time in which we are starkly divided nationally. And it's the work that I do in our schools, which I do constantly as part of PTA. You know this, Flora, from when you're in PTA, you're always in the school doing work, and you're working with a lot of different people. You're working with teachers, you're working with parents, you're working with students, and you don't ask those parents who they voted for. You don't ask for their political affiliation. You just get the work done because you have that common goal of making the school stronger, of making the classrooms better for our kids. And that's what's really missing in our district office, not only within our school board, within our entire leadership team. So that's what I hope to bring to the school board. And I think that's what most parents and most community members want.
Exactly. One of the biggest things, and this not only in the September meeting shortly after Kirk's assassination, but in the October meeting, we had Bus Safety Week, and our bus drivers still haven't had, their, or the fleet maintenance crew, excuse me, had their concerns met, or the investigation still ongoing. We're not, and even some of them are being divided amongst the rest of the staff within our district because they had the gall to come up and speak out against problems that they're seeing. And like you said, the current incumbent handed out some Lysol wipes during Bus Safety Week, but we're worried about buses breaking down and having transportation for all our kids, and the staff not being overworked. Those are things that a board member should be focused on because it's keeping the schools running, the operation
Yeah.
of the district.
And this is something that I spoke about in the October meeting in my public comment, is that there's a real impact to what's happening with our buses, with our maintenance workers, with our bus drivers, is that whenever you have buses that aren't working, there are impacts that happen down at the school level. And I shared a story of a parent who their bus just stopped working around the beginning of the school year. Here we are in November. It's still not working. So the district solution was to combine buses, was to combine routes. But what that means is that for this particular parent is that our kids go to two different schools because one of them is in need of classes, an IEP, and those classes don't exist at one school, but they exist at another. But as part of their IEP, they must sit by themselves on a bus. But whenever you're combining buses, there's just not room for that to happen. And there's a noticeable impact on this student whenever he goes to school sitting next to somebody else on the bus. They also had a bus monitor. With the other bus, they don't have a bus monitor on the new bus. So after a certain amount of time, whenever the parent decided, well, my child is being impacted negatively being on the bus, they have to take the students themselves to school. And they're not the only parent that has to deal with that. So we have kids throughout the county who depend on working buses, that depend on those accommodations that are in their IEPs, and they're just not being met. And that, like I said, is having an impact on that student. And if it's having an impact on that student, that's going to um, have an impact on them throughout their lives, especially if they're in first, second, third grade.
And the
Yeah, and I
Lysol
mean,
wipes,
all of this comes down to
did,
all
they
all
didn't
of
fix
this
that?
really comes down to no, of course not. Lysol wipes are not going to fix that. It's going to get a whole bus up and running, sir. But I mean, this comes back to that transparency that we're looking for, the talking to people and interacting with them, whether or not they agree with you, whether or not they share the same party with you, um, whether or not you think that they're trying to get you in a gotcha moment. These are our children and employees that we should be caring about. Um, whether it's our fleet maintenance crew, whether it's our custodian crew, cafeteria crew, um, the teachers in the classroom, the parapros, our kids need so much and they're in our schools for a majority of the day. And, our district is huge. It's a lot to handle. And, I think that all three of us have kind of, while we have similar values, we still have approached things differently of how to help people the best. And it's really upsetting to see folks that feel like they don't need to answer questions that families have.
Well, and you hit the nail on the head, which is that we have such a large county. We have a county that has so many different communities that have different needs. Um, and so how can you expect to serve that community if one if three of the seven posts don't get to add items to the agenda, if voters that live those residents that live in those posts don't get to have a board member who can speak up and have their concerns met at meetings. How can you even possibly manage it when you're not actually going out into your own posts and talking with people, or you're dividing your own posts into, okay, these are the people who I want to talk to, and these are the people I'm not going to talk to because they're not going to vote for me. You're going to have things that, and this is why people go to public comment to have themselves heard, because they're not being heard in their individual posts. We had, whenever the Sprayberry students were discriminated against, they did go to the board. They did go to, they did reach out to their representatives before that board meeting, and they weren't listened to. In fact, our district told them that they were lying. Who do they come to? We came to them. We came to those students. We connected with people in the Down syndrome community. We mobilized support for them. And ultimately, we were able to get district policy change as a result of that advocacy. And that's happened multiple times. Again, our current board majority is not going out and doing that work, but there are a lot of people that are doing it, including myself, including you, Laura, including you, Andrew. Whenever we're in our schools all the time, we're doing that work. Um, and um, I would like to do that work on a larger basis for the entire county.
I really
Well, thank
appreciate
you.
that.
Yeah. It takes a lot, Andrew and I know as to that just came off a campaign trail um, approaching 1 year ago. It takes a lot out of you. It's a lot of family time dedicated, as running for office has a tendency to do. And I know you know this, Michael, because you have run for office before. Um, but running for a local seat for your school board looks a little different. Um, and while running for a bit higher office, you really get to know your neighbors, even those that don't have kids in the school, and why it benefits them to vote for their school board member as well. Because a lot of people
Sure,
don't
sure. And
realize
yeah,
that that's important.
right. And you mentioned that, I have run before, and in that run that I've met a ton of people. I've met and because of the large overlap between the state house um, seat that I ran for and post 4, that I've talked to roughly about 35-40% of voters in the posts already. And whenever I was running, I didn't just knock on the doors of Democrats. I didn't just knock on the doors of people who were moderates. In the last 2 months of that campaign, I told my campaign staff, I said, I want to talk to people who are reliable Republican voters, preferably people who've been voting Republican for decades. And I want to talk to them not only to introduce myself as their possible representative in the future, but to also listen to their concerns, because I know that they've not been listened to even by their Republican, to the Republican who was in office at the time. And so that's what I plan to do here is to talk with everybody. But I'm going to make an additional distinction, is that, so you mentioned a higher office. I almost think school board is a higher office, because we as post holders, we are representing almost 100,000 people. In the state house, we're representing roughly 50,000, but you're one of 200. In this county, I would be one of 7. And so the reason I bring that up is that even though I am running for post 4, I realize, and only post 4 residents can vote for me, I realize the ramifications of the change in this county. If I were to win this seat, that it would flip the balance of power on the entire school board. So again, while only those in post 4 can vote for me, I plan to go out into the entire county. I plan to go out, especially into areas like post 2, post 3, uh, post 6, into those areas that haven't had a voice for decades. And I'm going to tell them why I should be your school board member, because I plan to be a school board member for the entire county, for all 7 posts, including those here in post 4.
Well,
I like
thank
that a
you for
lot.
It
that.
always happens.
I One of my ideals for the structure of our board would be to, if not literally or actually in behavior and commitment, like you just alluded to, approach the role in an at-large kind of way, and not just stay focused on my particular post, but the county at large, because so much is experienced as a county.
So something that I saw, and I know, Michael, you have given up a little bit of social media for a bit. Our school board's still partisan. And we talked about the maps being drawn to hold on to that Republican majority. And sometimes people get confused between partisanship and, values, whether they're progressive, conservative, liberal, or anything in between around outside those values. But in this case, partisanship on our school board is either Republican or Democrat. And those maps we talked about earlier were drawn to keep that Republican majority. And I know you said you wanted to reach out to, strong uh, Republicans. It's something that I did as well. What makes you think that you could win a race that is drawn for that Republican majority?
Well, I'll say that having, lived in this area for a while and having run and seen now in a couple of races the shift in voting patterns in this area, that we have quite a few precincts that are in now my house district stretched out into Cherokee County, which is decidedly different area than Cobb County. But in Cobb, we saw a lot of blue shifts during my two runs for the state house, especially in the areas that border the area of Roswell. Um, we saw a lot of in the areas where I did do a lot of my concentrated door knocking of Republican voters, that we saw more substantial shifts, especially in the areas where the precincts where I live and the surrounding precincts. And I think as with this being a school board race, that a lot of this area that is around me, they've seen the work that I've done in our school. They've seen that I have kept the partisanship out of our schools, that I've kept it out of the work that we do in PTA and in the various other work that I do here. And I think that running something in which we are talking about shared values is going to be very, very key. That I see what's happening in our schools. If you are also in our schools, if you're a volunteer in our schools, you see what's happening in our schools. That I can speak to the things that you know that are happening in our schools. And I think also having a child in our schools, in our elementary schools, is going to be a huge benefit for me, because a lot of the people in our area do have children in our schools, or they were in our schools themselves, and that a substantial number of people moved here for our schools. Um, and when you mention that we are a partisan school board, one thing that's interesting to note is that if I were to flip this seat and the board for Cobb were to flip, it would spell the end of partisan elections for the Cobb County School Board. The next step at the state level would be that they would make our school board elections nonpartisan, as they did with Gwinnett. And while that will be done in order to attempt to game the system for a particular political party, I would actually welcome that, as long as we can get the same turnout for the elections as we do for partisan races.
And I believe Andrew and I both felt the same way in 2024, that, there were 3 Democrats running, and we kind of felt the same way, that once, if any one of us had won, if all 3 of us had won, we knew that it would end partisanship on the board. We know that there's been talk of it at the state level already to um, remove that partisanship from the Board of Education, just because Cobb County as a whole is trending towards more Democratic voters, more liberal progressive voters. And so to gain the system, they're going to move elections, remove that partisanship, try to hope for a lower turnout where more Republican or conservative voters have a tendency to vote in those off-year, off-timing elections. And like you said, game the system. Something else that I had heard more recently about my race was, tying myself to the top of the ticket. And we have seen some things happen at a federal level that affects us all the way down to a local level. Where do you see yourself at with what our federal and even state government is doing towards affecting what our school boards look like and what's happening in our classrooms?
Sure. I mean, we can't look away from what's happening with the Department of Education and the dismantling of that department, and really focusing it on attempting to remove DEI from colleges rather than actually providing services to the students that are within our schools. that department was established for a reason. It was established because states were not doing what we were supposed to do, especially for our most marginalized and our most vulnerable student populations. Um, and I think that that's what's going to, that's unfortunately going to be a consequence, is that those students are going to once again have a hard time getting the services that they need. And, you mentioned SNAP, there's Medicaid, there's other things that those students depend on for their healthcare needs, for their nutritional needs, and all of that affects whether or not the student is going to be able to learn in the classroom or to be even able to be to attend school in the first place. And then what's happening at the state level, you've seen over the last few years, is that we've been moving into funneling more tax dollars to our private schools, private schools that have no accountability measures, that have they can restrict who they admit into their schools. And this is after 2 decades of underfunding public education by the tune of billions of dollars, including roughly almost $700 million to our Cobb public schools. I think that we don't have an unlimited amount of money at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level, and whenever we're spending money that really should go to our public schools and other things that should be even locally, that are going to things like the attempt to build a basketball arena, the Iggy machines, which are just, they're not being used, but we spent almost $10 million, and that this $2 million lawsuit for the redistricting of our school board maps, all of that money could be used elsewhere. And I think of that right now as we're doing things like our fun run, is that we're raising money just to get $25,000 for our school, and here we are, we're wasting tens of millions of dollars at the district level. I think that's also going to, because our parents are seeing this, and they're not going to care whether or not their representatives Republican or Democrat. They're just seeing who's actually going to be spending the money on things that matter in our schools.
Exactly right. And I think one of the issues that I'm not sure how much Andrew saw it, but it was something I definitely saw. And you're Northeast Cobb, I'm East Cobb. Um, is that even with talking with uh, folks that or candidates that have run for the Cobb Commission, is that not only is Cobb County trending towards more Democratic voters, but Cobb County is also aging. So we have a lot of elderly voters in our area that, and many phone calls went, well, I don't have kids in school anymore. I just vote for whoever has, whatever letter behind their name. What does that outreach to those types of voters look like when, they're like, well, I don't have to pay into school taxes anymore. My kids have already gone through Cobb County schools. We've always had Republican leadership. Um, why should they care, or why would they vote for someone like you over someone like David Chastain if he continues to run this
Sure,
election
and
season?
and PTA, we've done a lot of outreach to different groups of people that have typically not necessarily been as involved in the schools. Um, even like, for example, male engagement is a big issue in our schools, because a lot of, when you look at volunteers, they're, predominantly women. But we also do a lot of engagement with the grandparents in our schools, because you are also seeing that a lot of the caregivers for children are also the grandparent rather than the parent for various reasons. So we try to engage with grandparents and bring them into the school through various ways, whether that's through volunteering or not, because they may not have kids in our schools, but they have grandchildren in our schools, and they have a vested interest in making sure that their grandchildren get the education that they deserve. For those who don't have any ties like that to our schools, it also affects things like having enough workers for the workforce. So if you have started, if you're a business owner in East Cobb and you've um, done well for yourself, you're starting a restaurant, and uh, then you find you don't have workers for your restaurant or for your business. Um, the reason that schools exist is I mean, one of the reasons that um, we exist is to educate our kids, to make sure that whenever they are older, that they have opportunities for advancement throughout life, to have a successful life. And one of those is that our kids will be joining the workforce, either as entrepreneurs, either as business owners, or as workers. And so there's a vested interest for everybody, even if you don't have kids in our school, to having very strong schools. Um, you have lower crime. You have there's just so many benefits. So um, I will say I have not necessarily found a lot of people who did not have an interest in what is going on in our schools. I mean, we saw it even at the presidential level, a lot of focus on what voters were told was happening in our classrooms that was not actually happening in our classrooms. So people do care about our public schools, but it's important for them to know what's actually going on in our public schools as opposed to what they're being told by people who haven't had an attachment to our schools for decades.
And I'd like to welcome back Andrew. Uh, we're hoping not to have our technical difficulties again. Andrew, I was just saying I wasn't sure how much you've seen it in your race, but um, with Cobb County have an aging population, especially with people not having kids anymore in Cobb County schools. I was just asking Michael how he would, I guess, expect to reach out to those voters that, really just want to vote with a certain letter behind someone's name. Um, we also touched a little bit on um, tying yourself to the top of the ticket. That's something that I've seen people say that that's quote unquote why I lost versus the maps were drawn to keep the
Yeah.
Republican majority. Um, and just things that we have seen come down from our federal and state government, and how that affects our schools, just to catch you up of where
Thank
we've
you.
been at.
I apologize for the solar flare. But I'm back online. I
So feel free to
I
add your
think,
thoughts.
yeah, I mean, I just to speak from my experience out here west of Barrett, Weeba, as they say. I heard from a lot of people who said like, oh, well, my kids went to our schools and they graduated back in '98, and they had a great time. So nothing's really wrong. Like we're fine with whatever. And so some people just don't have their finger on the pulse anymore. And that is where I would want our board, our school district, to try and connect with our community more directly, period, more broadly. I know when the flare began, we were talking about being more of an at-large post member instead of just, here's my little zone. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to talk to only these people because only these people can vote for me. Well, the whole county's affected by your actions. So I think it's important to interact with the whole county. And that was something that was a prevalent view out here. And it's not invalid, but it's on us to point out the benefits, the ongoing relationship, like Michael just touched on. When you have a strong school district, you have a strong county, a strong future of the county, and everyone benefits. It is very much a rising tide lifts all boats scenario.
Exactly, exactly. And that's just so important. Um, Something that I know you wanted to touch on, Andrew, is um things that we normally stick to like what's happening within Cobb County, but as far as what we're seeing from a federal level, the biggest news this past week is SNAP benefits ending and how that affects our students here in Cobb. So, Andrew, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, yeah, it does. And it's the shutdown right now is the result of a number of things, and it keeps popping up in different ways. Everyone's being impacted, and I just yesterday was at Kennesaw Mountain with the kids going on a hike, and everything's semi shut down. They've got a few signs up, and that's the least of it compared to food on the table. And we've got programs in place that help keep the system running. And if people don't want to hold up a magnifying glass to the doldrums of capitalism, fine. But there are people who live in those areas not because of their own doing. And that's where I do think it is on a systemic, we need a systemic approach to help them and to keep everything moving forward and up. And SNAP is one of those benefits. And I think there are many issues with the societal view of the program and the people who receive those benefits. And there are false, provably, demonstrably, statistically false stereotypes of the people who receive those benefits. And then on top of all of that, we have students every day who depend on and are part of that program. And I think you could pull data, and it's the disabled community, the elderly, and children are some of the top recipients of the program.
And veterans too.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's a
Mm-hmm.
fantastic point. And
Mm-hmm.
there are other. Yeah, I'm trying to stay focused on the answer because I want to spin off into all these other points because everything's so interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
But the simplest summary is if you have a dependable source of nutrition, not just food, but nutrition, you are able to perform better, be that physically or academically, socially, emotionally. Like it is again, all connected. And we've got a breakdown right now that is avoidable, one, but two, becomes something that may be pertinent on us in our community to act more directly. I know over the summer, my wife and I put a food drive together to make meal kits for students and families who weren't going to be able to participate in some sort of summer lunch program. I'm happy to let y'all go into it as well, but in short, we in Cobb have an opportunity to, and it's not like nothing's available, but as a school district, we have the opportunity to, I'm simplifying, but check a box and provide even more services to our community. We don't do that because what I've been told and gleaned is that we don't like to admit fault or need because it looks bad. We're self-sufficient. We're a bootstrap county. And I think that's a great idea. But if people need help, let's help them, whether that's locally or nationally. And then on top of that, it just makes sense. There's all of these studies that show that for every dollar of spending in this one program, you get $1.80 or more sometimes of economic activity, not to mention stability, health, and performance, whether that's at a job or in school. So I don't, there's really very little to point to when you're talking about the need to shut it down or limit it because we've got too many people participating. It's there for a reason, and maybe it's imperfect, sure, but does it work and benefit our community and our country overall? Yes. And so that's something that to conclude my diatribe, I want everyone in our county
Keep going.
to understand who's being impacted and how, and the other opportunities they have to participate and maybe help those in need. So that's where I'd like to kick the ball back to you, because I know what we've done in the past and can do more of as far as like prepping and assembling meal kits or supplying sandwiches or materials to Must Ministries in the area. But what else is on that short list of ways people could get involved for you?
Well, yeah. So my biggest thing with that is that you hear the rumblings, whether it's online or in conversations with people, is that that's what these community programs exist for. Well, those community programs also cost money. It's also why we pay taxes into our government programs as well, to take care of the community as a whole. Um, and I really look at the school board as, really that boots on the ground, close to the people. We're literally taking care of kids and their families. So we should always be the ones to set the example, um, of what that looks like, whether it looks like us working with Must Ministries or the Sandwich Project or anything else. And you're really seeing it, through the smaller organizations. I know, I think you did it too, Michael. I did the Sandwich Project through Moms Demand Action. I've did some personally by myself along with my Girl Scout troop at one point. And that's something that, we have Cobb Schools Foundation that collects money for students, as well as materials for students that need. But we're now in a place where, government employees are not getting paid, or they might get back pay. But they're not only struggling to make their everyday bills get paid, but now we're seeing this cutoff of SNAP with their food on their table. And that affects not only the adults in the home, but the children in the home that are coming to these schools. And when you have hungry kids, they're either not going to learn well, or you're going to start seeing more behavior problems. And then you're going to see basically a snowball effect of problems. And I feel that we should be able to cut that off as soon as possible, try to meet that need with the funding that we do have available to us. Anything you want to add, Michael?
Yeah, and I'll say I missed some of Andrew's because of my own internet seemed to have cut off some of Andrew, but we have I want to say somewhere around $15 billion in state reserves. We have a majority of that is unallocated reserves. If we have the ability to give one-time like direct deposits to all Georgia citizens ahead of an election a few years ago when the governor was running, to give everybody a few $100s, then we certainly can do the same for families who are experiencing hardship, and we can call it whatever we want to. But we have the money. It's there for a lot of it's there for a rainy day, and if this is a rainy day, I don't know what is. And like you said, our schools, we are trusted institutions for our families all around the state, all around the country, in our local communities, and we should be doing whatever we can. And I have been involved with organizations that do the Sandwich Project, that have done food assistance throughout multiple counties that include Cobb County. Even our PTAs. I mean, last year for MLK Day, we did no-sew blankets for the community, and we donated those to a local warming shelter that was housing women during the coldest night of the year. So we can do that locally, but we also should be able to do that. Someone once said that a budget is kind of a a document on what you stand for and what you, uh, it's a moral document. And um, this is a reason why when we put our tax dollars into the government, that it should be spent helping people.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of depressing to me to see that wanting to feed children is now looked at to be um, partisan. One of the online accounts I follow is No Kid Hungry. And that's literally their purpose, is making sure that kids get fed. And just to see the vitriol about what they stand for, from some people that have spouted the talking point of protecting children for so long, that now they're looking at this online account that has been around for years to make sure children get fed, saying that, whether they're Democrats or liberals or progressives or socialists, any word that can be weaponized, when we're talking about kids getting fed. And again, we'll see problems in our education, and in our public schools if kids are coming to school hungry.
Yeah,
Um,
That's
and
a
I mean, one of the places that I used to volunteer with quite a bit, um, was based out in Cherokee County, which is an extremely red county. And I would venture that many of the people that I served on a weekly basis when I was volunteering there, were likely um, of a different political viewpoint of me. We didn't care about that. They just needed to get food for their families. Um, and this isn't a partisan thing. There are people who have struggled to put food on the table because, not just because of life choices, which is kind of the backdrop to all of that vitriol. It's because of things like that were unforeseen. They've lost their job. They've become disabled at their job. Um, they've had some sort of medical condition, and now because of the type of healthcare system that we have, most of their money goes into whether or not they get insulin, whether they not they get the medication that they need to live, in addition to having to pay for the rising price of
yeah,
groceries.
getting
Or you
paid
have
a
somebody
livable
who's
wage.
um, they've lost a parent because of COVID, or they've lost a parent um, um, who was a veteran, and now this is something that you have a one income household as opposed to two. So there are a ton of reasons why a family would struggle to make it, and we can't look at it and say you don't deserve this because we think you made a poor choice in life. These are people. We've made a conscious decision as a society a century ago that we were not going to let people die on the streets, and that we weren't going to let kids go hungry, and that we were going to educate our children. So we shouldn't go back on that, and I don't think that a vast majority of people want us to go back to how things were um, over a century ago.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you for that. We went way more into depth than I thought we would, but that's okay because I love having good conversations. But I want to bring us back upbeat a little bit, and hopefully wrap up because I know we're getting to the end of our show. Michael, I'm going to ask you, near the end of our show, we normally have a student or a teacher or community spotlight that has to deal with our Cobb County schools. Anyone you want to spotlight today?
Sure. So I'm going to spotlight. Uh, so we have incredible teachers in our district, especially those who work with our special education students. We have a set of teachers at our elementary school who have always just done an amazing job with our students. And as PTA, we have been becoming more and more involved with supporting them in their classroom. We have increased the amount of money that we allocate for diversity and inclusion and classroom support for those students, more than doubling that over the last couple of years. And what that looks like is that whenever they have some sort of classroom enrichment, like around Halloween, the kids were going and having their own trick or treat event, but they were also making cupcakes for their class, for the general ed classes, and for the staff of the school. And so we were purchasing those supplies for them in order for them to do that. And what that was teaching them was social skills, following directions, and these are all things that kids learn throughout their um, time in school, whether it informs their executive functioning skills, um, and that we want to make sure that all of our classrooms are supported and that everyone feels like they're a part of the student experience at our school. And so I just want to recognize those teachers that have been partners with us in uh, allowing us to do more for their classrooms, who have bought into that, who are doing these things, and that and also to let them know that we value them and that we want to recognize the work that they do.
Thank you for that. Thank you to those teachers and your PTA for working hand in hand. That's the biggest thing to me. What a PTA truly looks like is, it's not us versus them, it's us working together and really teaching those students about, um, and this might be a trigger word for some people, that social emotional learning. Making sure that students have those social skills that they need, that they're thinking of others. It's really important because we've kind of gotten to a place where some of us as adults have become very us versus them, whether it's the politics or the media kind of starting that. It really starts not only in the home, but in our classrooms where our kids, again, are spending the majority of the day just kind of looking out for each other. Andrew, did you have anyone that you might want to highlight?
I want to leave that with Michael. I know that we've got similar operations way over here on the west side of town, and it's I always like, I mean, a small thing that's on my mind right now is the little things that can be added with those kind of smaller boots on the ground operations at a local level. There are needs that may not make it to the top of the to-do list, certainly at a county level or even at a school level. And I just really love seeing when those local organizations could come together and identify a need and satisfy it. One thing right now at my kids' school that we're working on is raising funds for a water bottle filler addition to a water fountain so that kids can refill quickly and get back outside and play and also be hydrated. And it's just little things like that where parents could come together, work with our educators and our physical education leaders and teachers and identify those needs. Hey, what's something that we can help with? And it's going to make a big difference for the next 20 years. It seems really small, but it's going to help everyone benefit. And it's just nice to see those little things. And I just want to parlay that into the available opportunities to participate in solutions for anyone listening or watching who wants to get on board and help in some way. Please just comment below any of the posts that you see or reach out to one of the three of us and we can point you to organizations and opportunities to help out in a tangible way. I know it can be overwhelming right now with all the different things that are going on and going awry. And it does help bring you some peace to be like what we did at our house just yesterday. Hey, you know what? We can't fix everything, but we made 200 peanut butter sandwich and clementine kits to give to a shelter. And that feels like something real. And there's so many opportunities here in the county for that.
Those small steps make big differences in people's lives that are, just struggling to sometimes even find their next meal. And so, again, if you have a PTA at your school, please join your PTA. You'll be surprised, what your school may need help with. If you have a foundation, join that as well. Or if you have one and not the other, please join one of them. I know some schools only have one or the other. If you feel like starting a PTA, I'm sure you could either reach out to myself or Michael, and we can get you connected to the right people within the county to charter yourself a PTA and make sure that you have all those things in place. But there are ways that you can help at a local school level and then hopefully move it up to the district level. Again, I mentioned that Cobb County School District does have a Cobb Schools Foundation that they have their own website. You can find out ways that you can help students within Cobb County School District as a whole. And then there's other organizations as well that help both Cobb County School District and Marietta City School District, because Marietta City has its own school district within Cobb County, but it is a different government system. The three of us here are within Cobb County Schools. Well, so that we're at the end of the show. I would like to thank Michael for coming. I wish you much luck since your declaration and your announcement. I will see you on the campaign trail, of course. Your election is not until 2026, but we have a lot of things happening, not only within Cobb County schools, but within the state of Georgia that affects Cobb County schools. So please, thank you. Reach out to any of us, like Andrew said, because every student deserves a voice.
And every voice deserves to be heard.
Thank you, and have a good one.
Bye.
Not Board of Education, Cobb County celebration. Helping kids, no hesitation. Not Board of Education.